Miami was once paradise. Turquoise waves, endless sunshine, and streets lined with palm trees where wealth flowed like champagne at an endless celebration. Millionaires from every corner of the globe chose this city as their promised land, their escape, their crown jewel. But something changed. Something nobody wants to talk about. Right now, as you watch this, some of the wealthiest people who once called Miami home are quietly packing their lives into boxes and leaving, not because they want to, because they have to. And the reason why might shock you more than you think. This isn't about hurricanes or politics. This is about something far more insidious, something that crept in slowly, transforming paradise into something unrecognizable. You've probably felt it too. That strange sensation when a place you loved stops feeling like home. Miami is experiencing that exodus right now, and the silence around it is deafening. Once upon a time, Miami represented the American dream wrapped in neon lights and ocean breezes. In the early 2000s, this city transformed from a regional hub into a global destination. Tech entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley started buying penthouses overlooking Biscayne Bay. Hedge fund managers relocated from frigid New York winters to year-round warmth. International investors, especially from Latin America and Europe, poured billions into real estate developments that rose from the ground like glass monuments to prosperity. The message was clear. If you made it, you moved to Miami. The city offered something rare. No state income tax, international connectivity, cultural diversity, and a lifestyle that mixed work with perpetual vacation. Art Basel brought collectors and creatives. Music festivals drew celebrities. Luxury brands opened flagship stores on Lincoln Road. Every magazine profile painted the same picture. Miami was where successful people came to enjoy the fruits of their labor while still building empires. We all remember those golden years when it seemed like Miami could do no wrong. The skyline grew taller, the parties grew more extravagant, and the wealth kept flowing in. But wealth has a peculiar nature. It doesn't just transform places economically, it transforms them culturally, socially, structurally. And Miami began changing in ways that even the millionaires who fueled that change didn't anticipate. Around 2015, something shifted. The international money that had been trickling into Miami became a flood. Luxury condos that once sold for $2 million suddenly commanded $5, then $8, then $12 million. Neighborhoods that working-class families had called home for generations found themselves in the crosshairs of development projects. Little Havana, once authentically Cuban, started seeing artisan coffee shops and boutique galleries. Wynwood went from industrial warehouses to Instagram backdrop central practically overnight. The transformation wasn't gradual, it was aggressive. And here's what nobody expected. The very millionaires who had moved to Miami seeking paradise started feeling crowded out by even wealthier individuals who saw the city not as home, but as investment portfolio real estate. You've seen this pattern before in other cities. It's the cycle of gentrification taken to its most extreme conclusion. But wait until you see what came next. The infrastructure that made Miami attractive began buckling under the weight of its own success. Traffic, which had always been manageable, became nightmarish. The highways that once promised quick commutes from Coral Gables to South Beach now trapped drivers in hours-long gridlock. Public transportation remained virtually non-existent, a relic of planning decisions made decades ago when Miami was a fraction of its current size. The millionaires who had moved here expecting European-style urban sophistication found themselves in bumper-to-bumper frustration on Interstate 95. Worse, the city's aging infrastructure started showing cracks, literally. Roads deteriorated faster than they could be repaired. Water mains burst with alarming frequency. Power outages during summer storms became expected rather than exceptional. The municipal services that wealthy residents took for granted in cities like New York or San Francisco simply didn't exist in Miami. There was no robust network of libraries, community centers, or cultural institutions beyond the commercial. Everything felt transactional, commodified, hollow. One entrepreneur told a reporter that Miami felt like a beautiful hotel where nobody actually lived, just visited. That comment, made half-jokingly, captured something profound. The soul of the city was being traded for short-term profit. Then came the climate reality. Miami has always existed in delicate balance with the ocean that defines it. But by the late 2010s, that balance started tilting dangerously. King tides, those unusually high tides caused by lunar gravitational pull, began flooding streets in Miami Beach with increasing regularity. Not during hurricanes, during normal days. Sunny day flooding became a term everyone learned. Salt water bubbled up through storm drains, turning streets into shallow rivers. Expensive cars sat stranded in ankle-deep brine. Businesses in ground-floor spaces found their inventory ruined repeatedly. The city invested hundreds of millions of dollars in pumps and raised roads, but these were temporary fixes to a permanent problem. Sea levels were rising. Climate scientists projected that by 2050, significant portions of Miami could be underwater during high tides. Insurance companies took notice. Premiums skyrocketed. Some properties became effectively uninsurable. The millionaires who had purchased waterfront mansions as symbols of success now faced an uncomfortable truth. Their trophy properties might become worthless within their lifetimes. We've all seen those images of beautiful coastal cities threatened by rising seas. Miami was no longer a distant example. It was ground zero. But that's not even the worst part. The social fabric of Miami began unraveling in ways that wealth couldn't fix. The massive influx of money created a two-tiered city more divided than perhaps anywhere else in America. Service workers, the people who staffed restaurants, cleaned homes, taught children, couldn't afford to live anywhere near where they worked. They commuted hours from affordable housing in the far suburbs or counties away. This created a strange dynamic where the city functioned like a resort with wealthy residents served by an invisible workforce that appeared in the morning and vanished at night. There was no middle-class buffer zone, no community cohesion. You were either very wealthy or struggling to survive. This inequality wasn't hidden. It was visible on every street corner, in every interaction. The millionaires who had moved to Miami seeking community found themselves in a transactional wasteland where everyone was either selling something or selling themselves. Authentic relationships became rare. Trust eroded. The very people who had wealth started feeling isolated, surrounded by luxury but starving for genuine connection. Crime followed inequality, like shadow follows light. Not the petty theft of desperate poverty, but sophisticated crime targeting the wealthy. Home invasions increased in dated communities that promised security. Luxury car thefts became so common that owners stopped parking their vehicles on the street. Fraud schemes proliferated. One particularly brazen scheme involved fake luxury real estate listings that scammed international buyers out of millions before they even arrived in Miami. The wealthy felt targeted, hunted. The police force, underfunded and overwhelmed, couldn't keep pace. Response times lengthened. Unsolved cases piled up. The sense of safety that millionaires had taken for granted evaporated. One hedge fund manager who relocated from Miami to Austin told reporters he finally left after his gated community experienced its third armed robbery in 6 months. He said he felt safer in places that were supposedly less prestigious. Security, it turned out, couldn't be purchased with alarm systems and private guards. It required functioning civic institutions and social cohesion. Miami had neither. The cultural promise of Miami also proved hollow under scrutiny. Yes, the city hosted glamorous events. Yes, celebrities appeared at clubs and restaurants. But beneath the glittering surface, many millionaires found Miami intellectually and culturally vacant. The art scene, while present during Art Basel, felt superficial the rest of the year. Theater was limited. Museums were few and poorly funded compared to cities of similar size. The educational options for children disappointed many families. Private schools were expensive, but not necessarily better than public schools in other wealthy cities. Universities lacked the prestige and research capabilities found elsewhere. For millionaires who valued education and culture as much as weather and taxes, Miami came up short. They wanted their children exposed to world-class institutions. They wanted dinner conversations about ideas, not just deals. They wanted museums and concerts and literary scenes. Miami offered transactions disguised as culture. Everything was about money, about status, about appearance. Depth was sacrificed for flash, substance for style. This emptiness wore on people. You can only attend so many yacht parties before realizing you're having the same shallow conversation with different faces. The soul craves more. Then the pandemic exposed every crack in Miami's foundations simultaneously. When COVID-19 hit in 2020, Miami's response revealed the fragility of its governance and infrastructure. Hospitals overwhelmed quickly. Testing remained chaotic for months. The city and state governments sent mixed messages about restrictions and safety. The wealthy, who could afford private medical care, still found themselves in a city with overwhelmed systems. Many fled to second homes in mountains or rural areas. But here's what they discovered during those months away. They didn't miss Miami at all. Working remotely from Colorado or Vermont or upstate New York, they realized Miami had been selling them a lifestyle that didn't actually improve their lives. The warm weather was pleasant, but not essential. The nightlife they rarely enjoyed anyway. The beach they visited occasionally. What they missed was what Miami lacked: changing seasons, hiking trails, close-knit communities, quiet evenings, places where their children could roam safely, towns where people knew their neighbors' names. The pandemic shattered the illusion that Miami was indispensable. When restrictions lifted and offices reopened, something unexpected happened. Many millionaires didn't return, or they returned only to begin quietly planning their exits. Real estate agents started noticing a pattern. High-end properties were being listed not by people relocating within Miami, but by people leaving entirely. The destinations varied, but shared common themes. Austin, Texas, for tech entrepreneurs seeking another no-income tax haven with better infrastructure. Nashville, Tennessee, for those wanting culture and lower cost of living. Charleston, South Carolina, for coastal living without the climate existential dread. Jackson Hole, Wyoming, for those prioritizing nature and privacy. Even some returned to the very cities they had fled, like New York and San Francisco, realizing that functioning infrastructure and cultural richness mattered more than saving on state taxes. The exodus was quiet because nobody wanted to admit their Miami dream had failed. Selling your waterfront condo after publicly celebrating your move to paradise feels like admitting defeat. So people left quietly, citing vague reasons. Family obligations, business opportunities elsewhere, desire for change of scenery. But the pattern was clear to anyone paying attention. The millionaires were leaving Miami. The financial implications rippled outward from these individual decisions. When wealthy residents leave, they take their spending with them. Restaurants that catered to high-end clientele started struggling. Luxury retailers saw sales decline. Service providers, from personal trainers to private tutors to yacht maintenance crews, lost clients. The development boom that had seemed unstoppable began showing signs of oversupply. Newly completed condo towers sat partially empty. Developers slashed prices to move inventory. The secondary effects touched everyone. Property tax revenues declined, forcing the city to cut services or raise rates on remaining residents. The doom loop began, that vicious cycle where declining quality of life causes more people to leave, which further degrades quality of life, causing even more to leave. Miami had become expensive, crowded, vulnerable to climate change, culturally shallow, and increasingly unstable. The very attributes that attracted millionaires had been destroyed by their collective presence. But there's a deeper story here, one about the nature of place and belonging. Miami's exodus reveals something about modern wealth and rootlessness. Many of the millionaires who came to Miami were perpetual optimizers, people who made decisions based on spreadsheets comparing tax rates and weather patterns. They treated cities as products to be consumed, rather than communities to join. When Miami stopped optimizing their lifestyle equation, they simply recalculated and moved on. There was no deep connection to place, no roots, no sense of responsibility to the community beyond their gated enclave. This transactional relationship with place is increasingly common among the global wealthy. They have homes in multiple cities, citizenship in multiple countries, loyalty to none. When things get difficult or inconvenient, they leave. There's privilege in that mobility, but there's also profound loneliness. Humans evolved to be creatures of place, to know our neighbors, to have history with our surroundings. The millionaires fleeing Miami are discovering that wealth can buy access but not belonging. They can live anywhere but feel home nowhere. The people left behind in Miami tell the other side of this story. Working-class residents, many immigrants or children of immigrants, have deep roots in the city. They can't simply leave when things get difficult. Their families are here, their jobs are here, their entire lives are here. For them, Miami isn't an optimization problem. It's home, for better or worse. As the millionaires departed, these longtime residents faced an ironic situation. Housing prices, while still elevated, began stabilizing or even dropping in some areas. Traffic eased slightly. Some neighborhoods, freed from constant development pressure, began recovering small bits of their character. But the damage was done. The city that emerged from the boom and bust cycle was fractured, unequal, and uncertain of its identity. The legacy of the millionaire era would shape Miami for decades. The infrastructure deficit, the environmental vulnerability, the cultural hollowness. These couldn't be fixed quickly or easily. Other cities are watching Miami's trajectory with mixed feelings. Some see a cautionary tale. Austin, currently experiencing its own millionaire influx, sees echoes of Miami's mistakes. Housing prices soaring, traffic worsening, longtime residents displaced, culture commercialized. The Austin City Council has tried implementing policies to prevent full Miamification, with mixed success. Other cities see opportunity. They're marketing themselves as better alternatives to Miami, offering the low taxes without the hurricanes, or the coastal access without the existential flooding threat, or the cultural amenities Miami lacks. Nashville's tourism board explicitly targets wealthy remote workers with campaigns emphasizing music heritage, lower cost of living, and 4 seasons. Charleston promotes its historic charm and slower pace. These cities hope to attract the millionaire class without making Miami's mistakes, though history suggests they'll likely repeat similar patterns once the money arrives in sufficient quantities. The real estate industry maintains its optimistic facade. Miami realtors still produce glossy videos showing pristine beaches and luxury amenities. They emphasize the ongoing development projects and new luxury towers. They cite statistics about international investment and celebrity purchases. What they don't mention is the inventory sitting unsold, the price cuts happening behind closed doors, the quiet conversations with clients about exit strategies. The industry has enormous incentive to maintain the dream of Miami paradise. Billions of dollars in development loans, construction projects, and speculative investments depend on continued faith in Miami's trajectory. Admitting that the millionaires are leaving would trigger panic selling and investment withdrawal, so the message remains relentlessly positive, even as the evidence suggests otherwise. This disconnect between marketing and reality creates its own problems. People making decisions based on incomplete information, buying properties that may prove terrible investments, moving to a city based on promises that won't be kept. The environmental countdown continues regardless of economic cycles. Miami-Dade County's own climate projections show several feet of sea level rise by 2100 under moderate scenarios. The expensive pumps and raised roads buy time, perhaps decades, but they're not permanent solutions. Eventually, the ocean will win. Some engineers and urban planners quietly advocate for managed retreat, a controversial concept that involves strategically abandoning the most vulnerable areas and relocating infrastructure and population inland. But politically, this is nearly impossible. Too much wealth is tied up in waterfront real estate. Too many powerful interests depend on maintaining the fiction that Miami can engineer its way out of geography and physics. So the city continues building, continues developing, continues marketing itself as if climate change is a problem for some distant future rather than a present reality. The millionaires who are leaving understand something that the boosters won't admit. You can't optimize your way out of nature. Perhaps most telling is what the departing millionaires say in private versus public. Publicly, when they sell their Miami properties, they cite positive reasons for moving. New business opportunities, family considerations, fresh adventures. The press releases and social media posts maintain the pretense that leaving Miami is a choice rather than an admission. But in private, in conversations with friends or off-the-record comments to journalists, a different story emerges. Disappointment, disillusionment, sometimes anger at feeling misled. They talk about the traffic that wasted hours of their lives, the flooding that threatened their properties, the crime that made them feel unsafe despite spending millions on security, the emptiness of social interactions where everyone was networking rather than connecting, the guilt about their role in destroying the very things that attracted them. These private admissions reveal people processing a failed dream, trying to make sense of why the paradise they sought became a place they needed to escape. Miami's story connects to larger patterns reshaping America and the world. The concentration of wealth in fewer hands, the increasing mobility of capital and the wealthy, the vulnerability of coastal cities to climate change, the hollowing out of community and social fabric, the transformation of cities into luxury products rather than civic spaces. Miami isn't unique in facing these challenges, but it may be the most extreme example, the canary in the coal mine for other cities following similar paths. What happened in Miami matters because it reveals the endpoint of certain policy choices and development patterns. Tax incentives for the wealthy without investment in infrastructure and community. Development prioritized over sustainability. Short-term profit over long-term viability. These decisions have consequences, and Miami is living those consequences right now. There's a strange sadness in watching a city that promised so much deliver so little. The people who came to Miami believed in something. They believed that wealth could create paradise, that you could engineer perfection, that the right combination of policies and amenities could build utopia. They were wrong. What they created instead was a city that worked for almost nobody. Too expensive for working people, too shallow for the culturally inclined, too vulnerable for the risk-averse, too crowded for those seeking escape, too transactional for humans craving connection. The millionaires fleeing Miami are leaving behind a monument to misguided dreams and unintended consequences. The glass towers standing half empty, the roads that flood on sunny days, the communities that never formed, the culture that never materialized. Young people growing up in Miami have their own perspective on this saga. Many have watched their parents or parents' employers cycle through the boom and bust. They've seen neighborhoods transform beyond recognition. They've felt the instability of a city constantly reinventing itself for the next wave of wealthy newcomers. Some feel angry about being priced out of their hometown. Others feel relieved to have reason to leave and seek opportunities elsewhere. Few feel loyalty to Miami in the way previous generations felt loyalty to their cities. How could they? The Miami they knew as children disappeared. The Miami being sold to them now feels fake, a stage set designed for someone else's benefit. This generational disconnection compounds Miami's problems. Cities need young talent to thrive, but talented young people increasingly see Miami as a place to leave rather than build lives. The comparison to other failed urban experiments proves instructive. Detroit's collapse stemmed from over-reliance on single industry. Las Vegas struggles with water sustainability. Phoenix faces similar climate challenges as Miami with less international appeal. But Miami's failure feels unique because it failed during apparent success. The city didn't collapse from lack of investment. It collapsed from too much of the wrong kind. The money that flowed in during the boom years bought temporary glitter but no lasting foundation. The millionaires who chose Miami chose it for superficial reasons, and when those superficial attractions faded or proved insufficient, they left just as easily as they arrived. There's a lesson there about the difference between tourists and residents, between consumption and community, between places people use and places people love. The political implications ripple beyond Miami. Florida's growth over the past 2 decades relied heavily on attracting wealthy residents from high-tax states. The pitch was simple. Keep your wealth, enjoy the weather, live better. Miami was the flagship example, the proof that this model worked. But if millionaires are now leaving Miami, it suggests the model has flaws. Other Florida cities, from Tampa to Jacksonville to Fort Myers, have followed the Miami playbook, prioritizing low taxes and luxury development over infrastructure and sustainability. Will they face similar exodus patterns in coming years? The state's political leadership remains committed to the low-tax, limited government approach. But if the target demographic stops coming or starts leaving, that approach becomes harder to maintain. The tax burden shifts to those who remain. Services get cut further. The doom loop accelerates. International observers have their own takes on Miami's troubles. To some, it represents American excess and short-sightedness, the inevitable result of prioritizing individual wealth over collective well-being. To others, it's a specific failure of governance and planning rather than systemic critique. Wealthy individuals worldwide have watched the Miami experiment with interest, and many are drawing conclusions about where to invest or relocate their own families. The conventional wisdom that Florida represented smart money is shifting. Increasingly, wealth managers and family offices are advising clients to diversify geographic holdings, to avoid over-concentration in climate-vulnerable areas, to prioritize infrastructure and stability over tax savings. Miami's struggles are making people reconsider assumptions about what makes a city desirable or sustainable. Standing on South Beach today, watching the waves roll in and the sun set in spectacular colors, you might not immediately see the crisis. The surface still glitters. The restaurants still bustle. The beautiful people still pose for photos. But underneath, the foundations have cracked. The dream has soured. The millionaires are packing their bags and leaving, quietly, without fanfare, without admitting they were wrong. They're going to Austin, to Charleston, to Nashville, to places they hope will deliver what Miami promised but never quite achieved. Behind them, they leave a city struggling to define itself, wrestling with the consequences of decisions made during the boom, trying to figure out what comes after paradise fails. Empty tables, empty towers, empty promises. This is the Miami that nobody talks about, the story behind the glossy marketing and celebrity sightings. A city that attracted the world's wealthy with promises of perfection and delivered only expensive dysfunction. The millionaires who came seeking paradise found something else entirely, and now they're leaving to seek it elsewhere, carrying with them the knowledge that paradise cannot be purchased, cannot be engineered, cannot be optimized into existence. It has to be built slowly, carefully, with attention to community and sustainability and the unglamorous work of creating places where people actually want to live, not just visit or use or exploit for tax advantages. Miami forgot that lesson, and now it's paying the price, one departing millionaire at a time. Maybe there's still hope. Maybe Miami can learn from this exodus and reinvent itself once more, this time with different priorities. Maybe the departure of transactional wealth will create space for people who want to build community rather than extract value. Maybe the next chapter will focus on sustainability over spectacle, on belonging over exclusivity, on creating a city that works for everyone rather than luxury for a few. Maybe. But that would require admitting the mistakes of the past decades, acknowledging that the millionaire strategy failed, accepting that a different approach is needed. And judging by the continued marketing push and political rhetoric, that reckoning hasn't arrived yet. So the exodus continues. The millionaires keep leaving, and Miami keeps pretending everything is fine, that this is just a temporary adjustment, that paradise is still just one more development project away. If you've felt this change too, if you've watched your city transform into something you no longer recognize, share your story in the comments. And if you found this revealing, subscribe, because the next story might uncover where everyone's going next and whether they'll find what they're seeking or just repeat the same patterns in new locations. The cycle continues. The search for paradise goes on. And Miami stands as a reminder of how easily dreams can become nightmares when we forget that cities are communities, not commodities.